before we open up to general questions, when we come back from lunch, just so that we don't get ahead of ourselves, we'll dive into developing your story structure with plot points. Like we have these two elements, but now how do we kind of build an entire story structure? How do we use these as kind of the linchpins to build the whole thing? And then we'll talk about how to define your actual creative vision and share that with your clients. So that's what's coming next. Do we have any other questions about anything we've talked about or haven't?
Uh, yes, people online are saying they should have gone to psychology school instead of film school. So
I
true.
actually I
Yeah.
do have a psych background, and it was funny because when I got into filmmaking, everybody would tell me like, "Why did you waste your time with that degree?" But everything we're sharing here is really is definitely based on story is human experience, right? It's a retelling of an event. It's a human experience, and so to be the best storyteller, you need to be able to understand people and their experiences.
Like how would you tackle conflict in like wedding films when you don't really want to show that much conflict?
Yeah, so two things. So when you have a genre of film that can be hard to embrace conflict, such as a wedding film, one, still look for it, right? Is there the rain and they want to have the wedding outside? We did a wedding in Hong Kong where the couple wanted to have their first dance being choreographed. And so it was like, could they do it? Would the parts arrive in time? They built a big like Ferris wheel background and all these lessons. And could they achieve that? And like you watch that and it's like the story structure is pristine. Like it feels good just because you're like, wow, I get it. Struggle and then the whole journey, and then they end with this big dance and the crowd's applauding, and you can kind of feel it, right? So, is there something? Is there a gift somebody's trying to surprise somebody with? If you can't find the conflict, go one level lower and understand what conflict provides, which is a question, and try and create a question. Because without that, there's no reason to watch. If you don't have a question, that's when you watch a wedding film and it's like a montage. You're like, okay, I can shut this off now. So the question could be, what was that present? So you open up and the bride's all excited and they got this amazing present, but you don't show it until like the ending of the film, and I want to know what it is. Or it's somebody's got a surprise presentation, and what is that surprise? And they're rehearsing it in the morning, right? It's the vows that I've been working on forever, and I don't know if I can make it through them. And so it's them pacing and everything else, and we build up to can they do it, right? Find the question, and in that you do find conflict.
Okay, we got a bunch online now.
Okay,
Do it.
cool.
Okay, so how do you balance multiple characters with different or similar conflicts? Do you not even attempt to keep the storyline clean?
Ooh. Okay.
So let's make it tangible though. Let's go to the mortgage broker, but it's no longer just a single person. Maybe some examples of how you'd balance multiple characters in that
So
story.
for some reason that is beyond Ethan's control, the mortgage broker hires him and says, I need to have at least three of my agents in the film as well. Like I need to have four people. And as hard as he tries to say, like, let's remove all of our assumptions, he's like, no, you lose the contract if you don't include at least four people. So our challenge in that, when we have multiple characters, or even when it's relevant to have multiple characters, is that you want to have a singular character with strong desire and conflict. That's what we call the heart of our story. You're looking for the heart, that main character. The other ones serve the heart. They help build up that story. We call it the heart because it's the emotional core. More than anybody else, we are connecting with that one character in their journey, and their desire and their conflict. And you want to identify that. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have more screen time or anything else. We did a piece for Old School Cafe, and there's the cafe owner that was the heart, and then all these people that worked there that talked about their experience in the cafe and what it gave them. But it all led back to that central character. So you would identify in the agents and in the broker who's the main character, what's their desire, what's their conflict, and how can the other ones fit into that. If they don't fit into that, then you're basically putting all different stories inside the same piece, different journeys, and it can get very confusing.
This answer is gold, is what Joshua just shared about your answer there. Um,
Awesome.
Really quickly, can you go over the five whys again? I think this person was thinking there are very specific whys you asked, but just the process of your five whys.
Yeah, the general idea with the five whys technique to find desire and get deeper with somebody is just continuing to ask why, right? It's not that you're necessarily directed at it. It's that whenever somebody says something, you're going a little bit deeper, right? So let's imagine that Maddie loves to surf,
Okay.
right? And so it's like, why do you like surfing?
I just like getting out in the water on an early morning.
Ooh, why do you love the water on the early morning?
Uh, because the light hits this like hill in the corner and it's really pretty.
Why do you love beautiful light?
Because I am really fascinated by the color that the rock gets, because it's this really special rock down at Phillip Island, where I'm from.
Why are you fascinated by rocks and colors and formations and all of that?
Because I grew up at Phillip Island. It's this little island down the coast of from Melbourne,
Thank
maybe
you.
2 hours.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? And she's not actually a surfer, so that was all yes
I
and
am
it.
a surfer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
That was actually. I thought that was the yes and improv.
Yeah, it was a bit of that too. I don't really like the rocks.
But so we're asking them about where we want to, the area that they're interested in, and then whatever they're saying, we're going deeper with why they like that, and it will very quickly kind of get you into a territory that they haven't thought of, but it will get you to something much deeper as well.
For a documentary, I know you talked about, before that you said cut a person out if they don't have desire, but do you think it could still work in a documentary if your main character has no desire, but maybe you create conflict around them?
I've got a really good example for this.
So, so the question is about a documentary and a character with no desire, and can we just cut the character out, or what do we do, and how does that work with conflict? And I'll get to your story in 1 second. As it relates to that, I would say you need to surround them in somebody with strong desire. So your character, depression's a great example. Like depression is the definition of no desire. And so you could be doing a documentary on somebody who has something like that where they don't have desire, but there is this massive conflict, right? So the parent, the brother, the friend, whatever that's trying to help has that strong desire, and we want to see them achieve that. There's also, we're getting mildly philosophical. Some things, there is like a universal desire to it. You can imagine YouTube videos. You see the YouTube videos of like a war hero coming home and seeing their family. There's not a lot of character development, but like the desire is inherent in that. We can all recognize like wanting to be reunited with family. So you can kind of tap into some of that as well, if that's related to, the main being safe and, being able to have food and family and connection. Some of those things, we will just want that for the person if we're seeing that that's the conflict.
Mhm.
Story?
And so, if it helps you, this is something that we came across not too long ago with the production we have in New Zealand. And long story short, there was a huge earthquake, and there are these group of people from the community working on rebuilding this huge community that was shut off for 10 months with no access to anything. And so here I am walking around trying to meet all these people who were hurt by the natural conflict, the earthquake, and I'm trying to learn the desire of why they're working on the rebuild. And I came across this guy, and he's been working really hard, and he's connected with his job, and he likes the challenge of his job. But after spending an hour on the phone with him, he didn't have that deeper desire other than the paycheck, if that sounds really awful. And we're put in this position where he is the top dog who can speak to all the things that we need to get across to really show the conflict, right? He really understands the conflict of the structural challenge they have to rebuild this town so well. And the way we look at it is putting him in as a helper. So I kept interviewing and speaking with more different people, spending those hour-long sessions on the phone, and found this other guy whose sister is from the small town. And when he found out about the earthquake, he stopped his job up in the North Island of New Zealand, took his kids on a plane, and flew straight down to the South Island because he knew what it felt like to have someone stuck and feeling like they can't access any food, they can't get anywhere for 10 months. And so he was like, well, she's going to go through this for 10 months. I'm going to get there because I've got to help my sister. And so you can see immediately, right, like this guy has the desire and he's faced with the same conflict, but we'll use our other guy from before as a helper to the story. And so they intertwine. So for someone doing a documentary project very similar, that's a really great example of how you can connect the two together.
But you as the storyteller need to be able to realize that in that story, the character that flew down and is going to do everything is the main character, and you want to create their desire to make it human and we connect to it. Then the other character comes in with the conflict, which is the engagement, right? So we have to realize what they represent to us as the storyteller as well. And whose human journey are we trying to take you on? It's the character with the desire. Questions?
Yes. So you had some great questions to find the desire. Do you have any questions for finding conflict?
Ah, okay. So a really simple one is, well, what is, think of the steps that you've had along the way. Let's bring back to the example of this earthquake. And so I asked, well, what are the steps you took to fix? What are the steps you took to overcome this earthquake, right? Or what's been happening recently? And then from that, you find the different things that they've come across. So the first one came out, which was, oh, yeah, for starters, everyone is from a small town and no one has ever worked on a rebuild or recovery ever before in their lives. No one's ever worked on construction. And so that comes up as a conflict, right? Can we think immediately of some things? Well, which of the 6 conflicts that would relate to? Trying to rebuild a town, but no one has ever worked in construction before? Yeah? Yeah, it's like heaps of whispers. If anyone's listening online, I can't hear it myself that well. Machine? Yeah, fantastic. That would make sense, so that they don't know how to use any of the tools.
Really, you're asking about things related to conflict. So, other words for conflict or obstacle, challenge getting in your way. So we're asking the mortgage broker or the coffee shop owner, what are the greatest challenges in your business? What are the greatest challenges or obstacles in the industry as a whole? And they'll bring up fair trade and where they get the coffee and the beans and the pricing and the saturation of the market, or they'll bring up, the community aspect and different things like that. What are the things that might annoy you about your competitors, or like the way other people do it? What are you trying to do differently? Like all of those things where we get at obstacles and challenges help them to kind of go, oh, well, this is what I care about. And again, the other thing is go to the desire. Find out what they want, and then what is it that could get in the way of that, and use those 6 universal conflicts. And you can ask them, right? So our mortgage broker wants to really create, strong families by putting them in the right community and that kind of thing. It's like, well, what gets in the way of that? Right? Is it, not trusting my agent? Is it getting put in the wrong house? Is it getting sold something? Is it not being able to get the loan you need to get the right house? Right? Or the coffee shop. It's like, what gets in the way with you creating community or having the fair trade beans or whatever that might be? So the desire will lead you to the conflict, and you can ask them about that as well.
And for those, who was the question from? Was it Josh?
It was James.
James, with that as well, something that's really handy when you're speaking to people in your story is setting it up and saying, hey, I'll be really honest with you. I don't really know much about this. So I'm going to ask you some questions so you can bring me up to speed, because I don't know anything about mortgage broking or whatever it is. And that really helps too.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes before lunch. I've got some questions.
4 minutes. It's
4 minutes.
11:55, 58.
What are your
59.
three best? What are your 3 best resources for learning more about psychology?
Well, one, so we have all of this as a course called Muse, and it goes through the whole process. And in that, we have a lot of different resources and books and everything else. Malcolm Gladwell is a great author who has Blink and something about a dog. Along Came a Dog. So that's great around a lot of psychology. Dan Ariely, Predictably Irrational, is really great about how we make decisions and all of that kind of stuff. So Joseph Campbell and Hero of a Thousand Faces is, kind of a pivotal book in storytelling and understanding the mythology behind it and how all of this relates. Everything that we're talking about is boiling down some of those bigger ideas around storytelling. So there's definitely some great books you can start with that are probably a great place. And then inside our course, we try and provide a lot of resources and kind of dive into the science behind how these things work.
Really quickly about the remarkable ones, Megan was wondering, are there clients for it? Who funds it? I know you cover a lot of that on your website and podcast. Do you want to just tell people how they can learn more about?
Yeah, so The Remarkable Ones is our own original web series that we created because we want to tell the stories we want to tell. And so it's a way of almost trying to test out the ideas too, and building these processes and tools and then going out in the field and finding these remarkable people. So thus far, we have our first season done, which is 8 episodes. And we've got really lucky to have over 5 million views on the series so far, getting picked up by some really big blogs and sites and stuff like that. But it is entirely self-funded. And we generally do it in between other projects. So Canon had us do a series of workshops in Southeast Asia, and instead of taking a weekend off, we hung out with Van. Or a girl who was raised by elephants, or, so that's often how we do it, is it's funded by ourselves, but then we kind of work it into other productions. As we move forward, it's something we'll talk about a little bit later, is we just launched last week a film school. a 12-week intensive program where we actually work with filmmakers to understand the concepts of story, to find a story somewhere in the world like Iceland, Japan, Houston, and then we actually go in the field, tell it together, go through post, and deliver it, have a screening here. And those episodes are going to be how we make the Remarkable Ones moving forward. That it will be an actual community crowdsourced series where we work with filmmakers to find the van, to fly to Vietnam, bring that story to life. And in so doing, you really get an intimate understanding of how these elements work because you found it, you asked the questions, you're involved in the whole thing. So that's how we're going to make it going forward.
If you want to check out some of the other Remarkable Ones stories, you can go to theremarkableones.org. But we also have a few more that we're going to play today and use as examples to talk about.
Okay, 2 quick questions before we go. Michael was asking that he interviewed a character with a lot of conflict and desire. It was a 12-year-old autistic boy. In the interview, he struggled to articulate his responses, despite working hard to make the interview feel casual and conversational. What technique could help him provide better responses?
When you're dealing with, I think you said kids, and whenever you're dealing with children, it's really hard to get them to say a lot. And so definitely making it a game is huge. Like it's not an interview. We're going to play a game here. And having a lot of different questions and like getting them moving really quick and playing around. So our first movie was like a 9-year-old girl using lemonade to fight child slavery. And like she had gotten barraged by so many reporters asking her the exact same thing. So when we start to try and talk to her, you could just see her go into like those paths and try and say the same thing, which is like somebody who can't really say all that much. So it'd be when we would make games and go like, okay, so tell us about the moment you met this person. Oh yeah, what was that like? And like really high energy, fun, fast paced, just moving on, going through it. And if you don't get the answer you want, like you come back to it later. And then the other thing is looking at other people who can speak to their experience. So if you've got a 12-year-old autistic character with desire and conflict, who's somebody else who could speak to that? And how can we use place? How can we use what we show, Zelwyn's 100 DVDs on his shelf that shows the desire and conflict? So if our autistic boy, loves to build massive Lego architecture kind of things, seeing him do that and seeing how long he spends doing that shows the desire without him needing to say it.
And that kind of connects as well. P said the word experience. The experience on set is really important. And that's not just when they walk in the door to wherever you're filming that day. The experience leading up to filming, the experience towards your closing before they actually see the final piece. So for example, when we have interviews, we don't actually call them interviews with whoever we bring on set. And when they do come on set, let's just say we meet them in the morning, we're talking to them, and they might just feel a little bit timid or anxious. We will clear set. Like we will not have 30 people or 10 people more realistically standing behind the camera or watching them. We won't have their boss or their client sitting right there as well. The experience of the person to open up using the game is something that's extremely important to think about. What kind of responses do you want? What kind of environment are you setting for them to walk into?